We live in an age where information is at the tips of our fingers, and there are a multitude of online sources of knowledge that at some point you may find it hard to differentiate between fact from fiction. Hi, I'm Dr. Sharon, clinical dermatologist, and in this video I'd like to address several notions about skin and nail care that may just be myths or misconceptions that you have, or you've heard from your friends or family, or you've come across it on social media. So stay tuned to find out what they are. Sunscreens with an SPF 100 must give you 100% protection. Now, why do we wear sunscreen? To protect us from the harmful effects of UV radiation. Now, visible light also causes some amount of damage, like photo damage, but your regular physical or chemical sunscreens are not going to protect you from that damage. For that, you'll require tinted sunscreens, but that's for another video. In this video, I'll talk about UVR. So, a little background on UV radiation. There are three types of UVR depending on their wavelengths, A, B, and C. Now, C is the shortest, most harmful, and thankfully absorbed by the atmosphere. What we do have to worry about is UVA and UVB. Now, 95% of UVB gets absorbed by the atmosphere as well, and so while a small fraction of it only passes through, the effect or the damage it causes is quite staggering. Think back to the time when you got a sunburn after having stayed out in the sun for too long. Blame it on the UVB. And because of this, sunscreens or sunblocks in the past, like way back into the 1800s, mainly targeted the issue of sunburn. Even ancient Greeks and Romans used olive oil as a sunblock. But UVB does much more than just leave you with a burn. DNA damage, skin cancers like melanoma, squamous cell carcinoma, basal cell carcinoma, cataracts. Now, these are all potential risks the more time you spend out in the sun and get exposed to UVB radiation. So then what about UVA? Compared to UVB, UVA has a longer wavelength and a lot of it passes through the atmosphere, around 95%. And unlike the UVB, which only reaches the epidermis, UVA goes even further deep into our dermis, and it causes wrinkles, photoaging, causes various photosensitivity disorders, skin cancers, but to a smaller extent. So it does seem that UVB is more threatening than UVA, but we need to remember that we are exposed to a lot more UVA than UVB, around 10 to 20 times more from the atmosphere. So back in the 1900s, UVB exposure was the main concern, but it was only until the 70s or the 80s when first commercial products against UVA were manufactured. So now let's consider the SPF number. The sun protection factor basically gives you an idea of your sunscreen's protection against UVB radiation. It does not tell you anything about UVA. So if a person were to wear a sunscreen with the highest known SPF, they are still at a great risk or a greater risk from UVA, now that they'll probably spend more time out in the sun and because of a false sense of security. The SPF number tells you how much longer it will take for your skin to burn when you wear the sunscreen. For example, if your skin normally burns in, say, 5 minutes of sun time and you wear a sunscreen with an SPF of 30, it will take your skin roughly 30 times 5, that is 150 minutes or 2.5 hours of sun time to develop a skin burn or a skin erythema. Now, the SPF number is not a percentage of how much radiation it's absorbing. So SPF 50 does not mean it's absorbing 50% of radiation. And SPF 100 definitely does not mean that it's absorbing 100% of radiation. Now, sunscreens with SPF typically filter around 97% of radiation, SPF 50 around 98%, and SPF 100 around 99%. Now, the ingredients in these sunscreens have varying abilities to block out different wavelengths, and no single ingredient can just effectively block out the entire spectrum, and hence why achieving 100% protection is so challenging. Now, it's good if you wear a sunscreen with an SPF of minimum 30, you reapply it every 2 hours, it's water resistant, you're fine. But another important point about the SPF is that this number was acquired under controlled testing conditions. That is, a sunscreen was properly applied with an ideal amount, there was controlled lighting, humidity, limiting factors of wind or sweat. So out in the real world, if a person wears an SPF of 30, they might actually be receiving the protection of an SPF 15, especially if they have underapplied. So in such cases, when you're at the risk of a greater sun exposure, wearing a higher SPF will be beneficial. But the drawback, is that you develop a false sense of security, stay out longer, more UV exposure. So far, I've only mentioned about the SPF for the UVB. What about the UVA protection? Is there a grade helping us to determine the efficacy of a sunscreen against UVA? Yes. Depending on the country of origin of your product, there are a couple of systems. You might have seen the terms broad spectrum, or PA with the 1 to 4 stars, or the British Boot Star system, or what is the other one? UVA enclosed in a circle. These are all different systems, and they give you an idea of how well your sunscreen protects you from UVA. So what's the final verdict? No matter how high the SPF number is on your sunscreen, you will still not be completely protected from the harmful effects of UV radiation. For better protection, limit your time in the sun between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and wear protective gear and clothing. And we've reached the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy dermatology related content, do stick around, subscribe to this channel, and I'll be back with another video shortly. Bye.